Hello, everyone. Welcome to another Azure Podcast. So, this podcast will be available on the usual Azure Centric social media, and you can see this on the YouTube channel. So, today we're going to talk about Azure news. But with me, I have my good friend that is already a usual on the Azure Centric Podcasts, that is Andrew Lowes. How are you, my good friend?
Hello, Marcos. I'm doing really well. Actually, it's we're coming out of a bit of a rainy season and into some sunshine a little bit. So I think the whole world could use a little bit more sunshine these days. I'll take it.
Yes, we are. Finally, the good warm weather is arrived at our city, right, in Calgary. So it's just a matter of using and abuse on the outdoors. Now that we have a little bit more freedom, let's call it this way, because we've
Absolutely.
been enclosurated in our homes with all of these COVID things. So yeah, but this is not what we are talking about today, right? On this Azure Centric Podcast, it's not
A
about
little bit.
COVID. Although it's the team that every single one wants to talk about it, but we like to extrapolate that and go into a different direction and talk about Azure. In this case, Azure news. So 2 weeks ago, more or less, depending on where you're seeing this podcast, happens one of the biggest Microsoft events. In this case, was a developer event, and it was the Microsoft Build. For the first time, because of this pandemic, it was 100% online. I don't know if you saw the numbers, quite impressive. The number of attendees. Let's see if Microsoft doesn't really get excited about that and doesn't do any more of those events that me and you really want to be in person there, that we are able to manage and to learn and to networking so much, and that we love by participating on those, because it was quite different. I don't know if you did participate on the event. Did you?
I did attend a couple of sessions. There's a few developers that I still follow pretty closely. Not the least is of course my deep love for PowerShell. I feel Microsoft has given IT professionals a bit of a gift, and it's up to us to open the gift and use it. So we all have different skills and talents. I've been really lucky that I figured out I can do some administrative and some design tasks, and I like to think that I do okay in PowerShell. So it kind of leads
You've
me
been
down
modest.
this
You're doing
road.
more than okay. We've been working together, and you're doing more than okay. But that's okay. So, from the recent news, since in this case, since build, what is the news that you saw that we really like? We were discussing this as building the agenda for the podcast today, but I think we are sharing the same love for this feature. Can you tell a little bit more about it?
Oh, I would love to. So we were talking a bit about the Azure Image Builder. Right now it's in preview, and I think it's just a fantastic development that the Azure team has released into the preview environments for us. So it gives us the ability to deploy an image, to make the customizations, and then submit it into the builder service. And then that service does its kind of jiggery pokery magic. And out the other end to the Azure store comes your custom image ready
Yes.
to deploy.
When
So
when you meant the Azure Store, I just want to clarify that is the Azure Shared Image Gallery. It's not like,
Correct.
because when we say that, a lot of the customers and I'm starting to already hear them on my hearsay. I don't want my image to be available for every single one. So this is private, okay? We already got the possibility of uploading our Azure images, but the process was not as efficient as this one. Because that is the thing that is, I don't know what's your opinion about it, but that's the thing that I was looking for. That I did demonstrate that, I think was 2 or 3 weeks ago, to a customer of mine. And now that this is available, it will make our life way easier. What are your thoughts about this new feature of Azure?
Oh, absolutely. So yeah, we both agree the previous iteration was a little bit like we say kludgy. It was hit and miss, and sometimes you'd have these erroneous errors, but it would go through. Other times you'd get an error that would come up, and you have to go down kind of the rabbit hole and troubleshoot all kinds of different things. This service is a little bit more streamlined. So it allows you to deploy kind of a standardized Azure image. You can integrate this also with Chef and Terraform and other endpoints within your environment. And like you said, it is private. So when I think of the Azure Store, you're right, I should be more specific. It's the private image gallery for your tenant only. So you're not publishing your Bobs, you're staying in your own environment. So that's a good one to make sure we get clear. The other thing is this is available generally, there's specific regions, of course, but generally in the US and in Europe on preview right now. So you can, create some resources in one of those regions and test this out. It is region specific, of course, as are many previews. They don't want to push it out until they've worked out any kind of hidden issues. So, of course, with preview features, we do want to keep that in mind. There might be something in the background that hasn't been sorted out fully yet, but don't worry about that. Submit your bug reports like always when it's in preview. Never use a preview feature for production. Never, ever. We always say that, and it's so hard because as you know, you deploy something as a test, and kaboom, all of a sudden it's a production test, and we can never get rid of it. And then we have this weird one-off system that does like this one very special task, and that's great. Maybe it does it very well, but 4 years from now where we revisit and we go, oh geez, yeah, what the heck was up with that? We have to try and get this modernized.
Yes, but I agree. We have all of this, and that could be another Azure podcast telling basically stories about how a test environment or a development environment, it's now production, and suddenly saying, hey, can you help us fix this? But that's not the purpose of this one for now.
And the answer is yes, we can help you.
We can help you definitely with that, for sure. But one of the things that I like about this, and this is a very neat service, that I was really looking forward to it. I did some kind of automations, because one of the things that I like, and they already become this available on a preview, is the possibility of patching already existing images. And that, I think, it's the differentiate, because if we compare this what we already have today, that basically is you build your own image basically on-prem on your laptop, and then you upload that, you are uploading the entire image again. Becomes a new version of that image. So you need to be very, very, in this case, with a very good methodology and documentation to make sure that the version that you are uploading is the correct version, and the version that you are using, it's the good one. Because when you're doing all of these shared images, and especially on your Azure tenant, it's really important to just make sure that you are updated, because then follows what you have on Azure. Because when you're talking about images, in this case, the image that is on the gallery, you are allowed to choose the three versions of the same image. What does that mean? Means that you are allowed to use that images with the last update. So meaning that Patch Tuesday, everyone knows about Patch Tuesday. So basically you are saying that I want the last version. So the 2016, for example, or 2019 with the last Patch Tuesday, or the two previous ones, if I want to go on that path, right? And that it's scripted by the JSON, by the ARM templates and everything else. It's where you define that usually. But this part of be able to patch existing images. So when you're doing all your customizations, like you mentioned, another part very important, that this is already, the image is already built with the HashiCorp Packer. So mean that it's highly integrated with Terraform, and you can always import those Packer shells. It's really important, I think, for everyone, because now we have those image galleries that they are good as a starting point, but there are lots of customizations that you can do. So PowerShell DSC could be one of them, for example, and now you can distribute these across the world, and you can have exactly the same team that builds that image to be able to distribute on that tenant across the subscriptions, right?
Yeah, and like you were saying, it's so critical to push those updates and have that standardized gold image that we refer to kind of in amongst our technical circles. And the beauty of this, like you said, it uses the HashiCorp Packer to do the image build. And part of that integration is that it leads to a bit of natural integration with other HashiCorp technologies like Terraform and things like that. So this is really built for a tight DevOps deployment cycle using the build pipelines. You can call Image Builder from a pipeline and do tasks. It's also integrated with the Azure, the preview Image Builder Azure DevOps task. Rolls right off the tongue, very easy. But
yes, it does.
It's going to allow for some really excellent automation from our great partners doing DevOps operations. And it's going to make images a little easier to maintain, I think. And the important piece is those customized images, easier to maintain.
Yeah.
So anytime that Microsoft and all of these big partners are working together to come up with a solution like this, such as Image Builder, I think it's just fantastic, because it's going to make it so much easier for organizations that aren't using Intune or SCCM. They can still have a method to get those updates packed into a VHD or an image and push that out to their subscriptions in Azure. And as you know, with the image gallery, what goes up can also be brought back down. So you can utilize these images, of course, licensing notwithstanding, sort your licensing out, of course. But you can use these images in different things like Azure Stack. So you can have your localized instance of Azure available on-prem, offline, whatever your implementation of Azure Stack is. I think we all think back to that time at Ignite where Microsoft launched their SUV with Azure Stack on board.
Yeah.
every time I see even a picture online of that SUV, it's really mind-blowing to think that it's a full Azure instance, literally on wheels, just driving around.
Yeah.
Technology, and to think that you can now integrate DevOps operations with Azure Stack. Not that this is a new thing today, but it's yet another piece of the puzzle that they're helping to solve. So I think it's just fantastic. And the other piece that I like with this is they're not just talking about Windows. Certainly in the enterprise world, we do tend to focus a lot on Windows. Definitely my area of specialization. But Image Builder is also supporting various flavors of Linux as well. So Ubuntu, Red Hat Enterprise Linux, very important. CentOS, SLES, Windows 10 Enterprise as well is supported for the Image Builder. So that's going to be really cool. I can see kind of some future projects coming down the pipe with remote desktop and Image Builder. I think it kind of writes its own script there.
And it is, and one of the part that I like it is they did draw a line on the sand regarding the Windows Server. So this is only usable for 2016, 2019. And I'm really glad about that, especially on the Windows client as well, because I think this is going to be useful for all of this. Even the Ubuntu versions, it's not all of them. It's the latest one.
That's correct. Yeah,
the Red Hat, it's the 7.6, so and 7.7. So you don't have the retrospective that we're starting to see. A lot of those things happening with Microsoft that they had to basically build all of these new features, but make it compatible with older versions. So that's the part that I like about that.
Yeah, and I think that's important because when we see Patch Tuesdays, for example, right? So all of this backwards compatibility, I think it, to a certain degree, I'm going to be a little bit bold, I think, in my phrasing here, but I think it takes away from the agility of Microsoft. And I think that they're trying to be cautious in their design, that they don't focus so much on backwards compatibility, but that they focus on enabling organizations to bring older technologies forwards. And I think that that's part of this solution. I mean, I'm extrapolating a little bit on that. And we don't want to go too deep down that rabbit hole, of course, but it is important that organizations have a continuous upgrade plan, that they know what to do, what they need to do, and have a methodology kind of in their own pipeline to be able to support future versions of Microsoft technologies. So I think this is a big part of that. And it's not just about Microsoft technologies, it's about blending it all together. So building it using the HashiCorp engine, I think, is really smart. It's going to first engage our DevOps partners and make sure that they help drive the whole product platform forwards. I think that that's really quite smart. Yeah, absolutely.
And one of the other things that I like about this is the way that when you build this, and I think that's a very good segue for the future videos that we can both create, is to demonstrate the applicability on this. And probably should do a podcast only for that. But basically is to be able to create these image template artifacts. So basically you create your JSON template with all of that, and you start to create, accumulate other things, because it's not only to build the VHD that you are doing, it's to build the template that you can do it. You can associate, for example, certain VM types, so sizes, and now you can start to build instead of plain blank Windows Server, for example, 2019, you can start to build, for example, a SQL Server. And now becomes really important, something that I think we need to have another podcast idea, for example, about Azure governance. Because when you're starting to go on the path that you are deploying all of these images and you are starting to build your, let's call, service portfolio with coupulating those images with VM sizes and everything else, is starting to be really interesting, because now you're building your service catalog, or you're building, let's call it, your Azure Gallery, private one, for the purpose of your in this case, business and organization. And it's not like, oh, I'm going to deploy Azure SQL. Sure, but or in this case, Azure a VM with SQL running from the gallery. Sure, you can use that. I'm sure that you can use that as well, or I think you can use that as well as a standard. But those things, it's starting to get a little bit more automated. In this case, we can prepare that on that way. At least it's one of the things that I like. We have been talking a lot of this. This is the most exciting news. Do you want to add anything else so we can start moving forward? Otherwise, it's going to be the entire podcast talking about Image Builder.
It could be. Well, I think we could go a deep dive with this pretty soon. Absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
We should mention a little bit about cost, right? So I always like to kind of throw in a little bit of reality with my dreaming. Image Builder, fantastic brand new preview tool, but there's a cost to using it. So according to Microsoft Docs, it does spin up a D1 V2 VM when it's doing the image build, and that instance with its network is attached and active during the build process. Now, it is decommissioned at the end of the build automatically. However, you have to understand there's going to be a bit of a storage cost, because you're creating an image. There's data there, so there's going to be a storage cost. So during the creation process, you'll also have some compute and network charges as well. So just a heads up on that. It's not a free service, but it is a really cool service. And, I think those are going to be relatively minor costs, depending on what region you're working out of. I think your mileage may vary. It's going to be the statement on that one. But I think it's a really cool feature, and I'm excited to actually dive in and do a little bit more with it. Yeah. So thinking about network costs, Mr. Nogueira, I think we have something else on our agenda that we wanted to address when it comes to networking. Why don't you tell us a little bit more?
And if you guys are following our podcast, I already put on the screen, because I was quick on my fingers to just do that, is the optimize for internet traffic with peering service and routing preference option. So all of that is very word mouthful. What does that mean in this case, Andrew?
Well, it's going to give us the ability to peer across larger networks, and it's going to give us the ability to add some customized routing. So Microsoft has announced that they've worked with some service providers and exchange providers, internet exchange providers, not to be confused with Exchange brand of email servers. So they're using software-defined cloud interconnect, SDCI providers worldwide to provide localized routing and switching. So basically, you're going to have the ability, like we've had for years with VPN connections, to offload your internet to a local source. Now, it needs to be a partnered source. It needs to be part of this preview service, again, with Microsoft. But the peering service is going to allow you to select your routing preference, and you can go from your Microsoft global network to the closest POP, then to your local ISP. Yeah. And it's going to cut down basically your egress traffic charges out of Azure. We talk about it's free to put everything up in Azure, but if you want to bring it down, there is data egress charges.
Yeah.
So what goes up must come down at some point. And the same is true. We're going to access data. So if you're whether you're working from home or you're working in the office, you have to get your data out of Azure somehow, unless, of course, you're using one of these awesome remote desktop technologies. But many files get downloaded, and even if you're in a remote desktop, let's say, because this is a really good example of this. So you're using an Azure remote desktop, Windows 10 spun up. Let's say you have your routing preferences set to what's a big provider here in Alberta, Canada? Let's say TELUS. So our local provider would be TELUS Internet, and we know that they're also partnered with Equinix. So we can go from our Azure tenant down to an Equinix POP and out to a TELUS internet access as an ISP. So that's going to save internet-related charges directly coming out of Azure from your users' remote desktops that are spun up, for example. How do you see this playing out a little bit?
I see this because the part of the peering is very interesting. When you talk about peering, and usually when I talk about that with my customers, I always like to talk about the different types of peering. Usually you have the public peering, the private peering, right? And then you have the 365 peering. So the public peering it's very easy to understand, and I think that's the part that this peering service is gonna be awesome. It's because the problematic that we are facing right now, for example, is when you have express route, and usually it's where you configure this, right? So it was most like exclusively for express route. Even VPN, you didn't have this available.
No, this is much more advanced for sure.
It was way more advanced. So it was more, I see this, if I'm not mistaken, that was almost exclusively for the express route. So on express route, basically you have a direct connection from your data center, okay, into this case, into Azure, basically. And then from there, you can have this public peering. What does that mean? Means that when you're going to these public services that have, for example, ASR is one of them, you're going through the public IPs. When you enable the public peering inside of that express route, you are not using anything less. Okay? So the problem that we have with that is exactly the same. Oh, jeez. That we have exactly the same. And what I see with that is this. When I start to go on that path, is the path that I see of the company going from on-prem to this Azure Public Service. Instead of going to the internet, they're going through that express route link. And by doing that, it's easy for them to control and to just have secure. And like you said, the egress traffic, it's depending on the express route that you're having, it's not that important anymore, because if you're using, for example, the premium, you are not taking any more charges. It's unlimited. And that happens exactly the same, for example, for the private peering, where you have those private peering means that all your Azure infrastructure that you have virtual machines running, you are using exactly the same link. But it happens as well, and we saw a lot of those when we're starting to use, for example, Office 365 and Dynamics 365, that they are different data centers than Azure. So if they are different data centers than Azure, they have different public services. So Office 365 is a public service. So, and the reason to have that is you can use exactly the same express route to enter what we call the Microsoft Global Network or the Microsoft Network. This peering service, the interesting part is using ISPs or anything. What you're doing is and that was always the problem with these branch offices, because you are not putting express route. Express route is quite pricey for a branch office. So, and usually what you're doing is you're doing a VPN, right? And
Absolutely.
with the VPN,
yeah, you're not going to put ExpressRoute in every office.
Exactly. Okay, and that was the purpose of that. And by doing this, what's happening is the problem that I'm seeing happening is on those branch offices, you need to be very good on the routing part of it, so you can start leveraging this. With this peering service, they are basically embracing all of the company into this peering. So basically, even if you have a VPN or not, and you want to go on any Azure, Office 365, and Dynamics 365 services, even if you have public peering, private peering in this case, or even if you have Office 365 / Dynamics 365 peering, you can go through this service. That's where I see the value of this. So now you saying to either to the ISP or the connection that you're going on that path. I think it's a good way to move forward. Again, it's still some of those things as you see the announcement, and I highly recommend going there to just read, and you have a lot of documentation to do it, to just embrace and enlarge the WANs that you have on your organization. So it's pretty cool that you can define, for example, the routing preference that you want, as you see over here on our screen. Right?
Yeah, I think
Andrew?
it's important because it's another step that Microsoft has taken to give customers an option. So in this case, it gives us a secondary routing option to go to the internet instead of over the higher cost. Gives you a different option through a different ISP.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And that's the part that is really cool about it is all of these new ways that you can do it, and the use of the peering and all of that. And because it's great when you see all of these that we already been working with, but it's not every single customer or every single day that you are implementing on, you going on a customer that have express route. And that's the part, right? Exactly. That we are extending that good things that express route allow us to do it. So it will be robust, reliable, and basically peering that we are talking about. In this case, you have the consistent way to do it. You can have local redundancy, for example, or you can have geo redundancy on this peering, depending on what you're talking about, right? So it's really, really interesting, this new feature. So one of the other things that I want, and I did catch you while you were drinking water, but that's okay because we did talk a lot. Is one of the other things that I think it's not infrastructure related like we are experts, but I think it's a techie one. And when I see this new feature, it's kind of cool. So what we're talking about is the Azure Maps. So Azure Maps, if you are not familiar with Azure Maps, it's basically the way that you can pinpoint your location. But what it is cool, and if you see in this case the announcement, is now that you can create indoor maps. So for example, they see these geographic content that you can do it inside of the building. So you have a building. This is, in this case, I think it's the Microsoft campus. It's the Microsoft campus. And basically you can do indoor buildings. So you can show and you can do pinpoint inside of the indoor part of it. And then it's pretty cool because now, especially, and I see this value, for example, for the events that we are going. Ignite next year is going to be online, unfortunately. But I'm sure that in 2021, I hope so, that's going to be on like in person. And then that's going to be very cool to just kind of pinpoint where is Andrew, where I can talk to Andrew. I remember this not a long time ago, like a few events ago, that we had our tag. And because I was a SME at that time, and I was one of my things besides speaking, it was doing this Azure boot service. So basically became a ask the experts. So they had this RFID on our badges that basically was filtering us. I think it was on your first Ignite, right? That you went?
It sure was. Yeah. And they had these kind of cool RFIDs, and it helped to figure out actually quite a bit and open certain doors and some not. And
yeah. And
yeah, it was actually really good.
It was really impressive. But yeah, I think this part is awesome. The potential of this is tremendous. But I'm seeing this, for example, on big campus, and when I'm going to Microsoft campus, they have north of 150 buildings, and it's like, oh, I'm on building 92. I know where it is because it's where it is the museum and the store and everything else. But then other teams, they are on different buildings and they are always switching around. So especially when is the MVP summit, that you need to go on this building. And I'm sure that with these Azure maps, in this case, the functionality that will allow us to pinpoint that, and especially the rooms, because in each building, imagine that you have at least 10 of the images, not images, 10 of those meeting rooms, and then you want to know first where is the building and then where is the meeting room.
Meeting rooms are the devil in an office. They really are.
Yes, especially when you have open spaces, and then you are going around and around and around and say, I was here before. And I think it will help us in this case.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think it's going to be awesome. That indoor mapping feature is really cool. They talked in their release about Azure Maps about some indoor GPS kind of partnerships that'll work, easy to integrate with Azure Maps through their API for geolocation. Yep. And I think, like you said, where it's really going to play out for Microsoft is at those big events, at big campuses where there's multiple buildings, multiple meeting rooms, kind of overlapping and conflicting schedules. It makes it difficult and complex for a normal person I always think like myself, just a regular guy, to try and find the right room at the right time. Ignite is a really great example of that, to track each other down, you and I to meet. I think by day 2 or 3, it was good. Okay, let's meet by the beverage fridge on floor 3 at this spot at the top of these stairs here. And, we can figure it out. But why not have this really cool geolocation where we can share our location with each other at the event and connect with different people that we want to talk to and meet. That's one of those things that I think you and I just love about those events, is the ability to have a little bit of face-to-face, some networking interaction, meeting people. That was where I met Jorge for the first time in person. I don't speak Portuguese, at least not well at all, as you know. But I really enjoy meeting all of the different people and the different personalities. Microsoft is such a big family, and there's really cool opportunities in there. So I think this mapping is really going to play kind of into that whole family environment, that it's the way I think of things. And I think it's going to be really cool. I can't wait to see how we see some implementations in reality when this comes out. Yeah.
And when I was reading this, one of the cool ideas that I had is you can apply this with a lot of other APIs. For example, the geofence one. So and the part of that you can apply this with Azure Digital Twins, that basically is, okay, you have the floor map as we see over here, for example, and now we can have this as a digital twin of that floor map, that you can pinpoint some things like, depending on, because if you are familiar with digital twins, is you have all of those sensors available on that geolocation. So now you can pinpoint that. And for example, if you have a sensor that is temperature control, I can see where is my house, it's cooled or not. And then you can create like this geo location and geofencing, when you can have that information regarding that, to see, okay, for example, I'm seeing this in a lot of those practices, like the usage of this is unlimited. I was almost creating, not creating, but exploring how I can apply this to my house, for example, because we as geeks, we want to have our house as much as possible with tech, right? And Absolutely. It's tremendous. It's not our sweet spot in this case, but I think it's a very cool one to just exploring. And we are exploring this new functionality or this new feature by a totally different vision. Probably if you are a developer and you are listeners and you want to see this more, I highly recommend going to the Azure blog news. At least you can search it on your favorite browser and your favorite search engine. Doesn't matter.
On Edge Chromium, of course.
I'm using Edge on the Mac, and I have to say that I enable as a default browser. I'm pretty impressed.
I think we should do a whole podcast on profiles and how that applies to IT consultants. I think we could really fill some knowledge gaps on that one.
Oh yeah, totally. We have a lot of things that we can talk about on this Azure podcast. It's basically record and let it open, let it go. And the good thing about this, with all of the problems that I had with my camera and the new setup, and I apologize in advance for that. But yeah, this is like open mic, and we're talking about all of those things that we wanted. So we are reaching the end, I think, at this podcast. So once again, thank you very much for everyone listen. If you are seeing this on YouTube, please give a thumbs up to just help us grow these podcasts. And if you want to follow us, is at Azure Centric, either on Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, and Instagram. So in this case, Andrew, where they can follow you or when they can find you?
Apparently, I'm often on Azure Centric lately, but also can find me on my own channel on YouTube at Azure Tracks. You can find my blog, azuretracks.com, and we're also Azure Tracks on Twitter and on LinkedIn as well. So feel free to give us a visit. We have lots of really great articles and walkthroughs on using Azure technology. And of course, thank you for listening. You guys are what keep us coming back. And Marcos, thank you for having me.
Yeah, exactly. And you guys, if you have any questions, just please put on the comments, and we are more than welcome to answer those. So thank you very much for listening to another Azure Centric podcast. See you on the next one. Bye.